Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Improvement Nerd Podcast. We're doing a little take two today. Our last Disney conversation was a blast, and after we wrapped, we both realized we didn't even scratch the surface. So this is part two, and we're going after a few things we didn't fully unpack last time. We talk about queue design, how Disney keeps you moving and entertained so it doesn't even feel like you're in a line. We get into mistake proofing in the parks, beyond just the standard ride safety check, and into those subtle layers you barely notice. And we spend time on the Disney app, how it changes the entire flow of the park with wait times, lightning lane, mobile ordering, photos, all of it. Plenty of lean concepts, plenty of Disney nerding out. So buckle up, check that yellow strap, and let's do this as we wage war on bad process.
Hey, we're doing take two today. I had so much fun in our last conversation reflecting on our trip to Disney, and I think there's some more meat on the bone that we're going to go after today. Thinking back to our previous conversation, I think we hit on things like visual management and some of the standard work, specifically around preparing the cast members to manage the crowd during the parade, even the parade design with safety in mind for people to cross the parade route to get to the other side of the park. So there's a lot of lean examples in our previous conversation that you and I talked about, and I think there's more. So for today, I have some ideas of what we might be able to talk about. We didn't really talk much about the app and how that digital platform really allows for individuals to navigate the park in a more seamless, integrated fashion. So I really want to talk about that and explore the good, the bad, and the lean concepts of their application. I think we did talk a little bit about how in the queues, Disney is striving to make it feel like there's not a line at all in the queue design experience. So I want to circle back and talk about that. Mistake proofing. I think there's some examples of mistake proofing that you and I could talk about. Everyone knows the ride safety check, when you get into the ride, it advances and you tug on the belt. But I think there's more mistake proofing designed into their process. So I just, in brainstorming a little bit, I think there's a lot of lean concepts yet for us to explore. So are you ready?
Yeah, I'm buckled in and I'm checking the yellow strap to make sure I'm secure.
Yeah, yeah. Check that strap. Make sure you're ready to roll. All right. So I want to start with and reflect on the previous conversation of navigating the queues and queue design and how that helps to create flow for the park goer. So last time we talked about the queue that went vertical in that ride, I believe was the Jungle Cruise, where we're walking by and we're making decisions whether or not we enter it. We see the posted sign that says 30 minutes, and then we look in past that sign into people boarding the ride, and we just see people moving. And to us, we're like, okay, this isn't that bad. I think we even had an impression of this isn't going to be 30 minutes. So we get in that ride and we start our queue experience, and almost you have like an experience before you have the experience at Disney. So I want to kind of pull out when we were walking through that queue or any of the other queues that you and I and Audrey walked through. What were some of the intentional things you saw in those queues that really helped to create the experience before the ride experience?
Yeah, I think that's the intention, right? Is to create an experience as you're in the queue to prep you for the ride itself, and maybe almost give you the impression that the ride is actually longer than the 2.5 minutes that you're on it. Because you're in queue for 30 minutes, the ride's 2.5 minutes. So how do you get that jungle immersion while you're in the queue? And so there's a lot of theming that we saw as we went through the queue. The good thing about the queue was that it was long. And we talked last time about how it was vertical. So it went up so that they can extend the queue. And, they put a lot of stuff in that. But what that did was it kept us moving But even if we were stuck, we would be looking at, the binoculars or the canteens from the skippers stations. There was also some overhead announcements that were playing that were on theme to the ride that were funny. So it was kind of forcing you to pay attention to not miss what was critical announcements versus what were the funny themed announcements and the funny props that were in the queue. But what was unique about that queue was that it went vertical, because I think the idea is, the more you can extend the queue, the less of a feel of a wait there is. If you're just standing in a line outside in the sun, that's going to be horrible, right? But if you can somehow wind people through something that's themed, that's great, but that takes up real estate to do that. So
Yeah.
they were thoughtful. In Disneyland, I don't think they have as much real estate as Disney World, so they had people travel upwards.
Yeah. I don't know of other rides there that use the vertical space for queuing. There might be, but I want to think a little bit with you about how use of vertical space may be an opportunity for improvement for other industries and organizations to extend feeder lines or 5S in a different way. So do you have any examples of maybe how an organization may benefit from thinking differently about their vertical space?
Well, thinking differently about vertical space is something to be considered. I think my example was in relation to real estate at Disney. You'll have a footprint, and you don't want that footprint to be consumed by queues. So you got to think differently. I remember when I was in the car space, lots have a lot of cars on them. And you have a lot of cars on the back end and a lot of cars on your front lot as well. And to minimize the space of the store or the dealership, they started thinking about, could we create vertical parking lots? And that was different. And we had stores in California where the real estate was real expensive. So
Mhm.
we started thinking about vertical parking lots, and that ended up working out really well. So I think you're right in that if you can't expand out, how can you expand up? Should be maybe a thought process. And maybe it's even within the building. So we both worked in manufacturing for a little bit, and we were in a big warehouse, and there was a lot of real estate being taken up, but there seemed to have been room for maybe some vertical shelving to where we could have condensed and consolidated a lot of inventory to create more room for maybe more value added work to be performed.
I think that's a great example and takeaway. My key takeaway is just to think about how you might use the vertical space. So thanks for engaging in that dialogue and talking about this practice of queuing, how Disney does it. And I think it was very creative. I agree. The vertical queue was unexpected and created a pretty unique experience. I think our takeaway was there's a lot of vertical space and a lot of organizations that they're not even thinking, how do we use it? So hopefully that helps them in their journeys.
I think just as much as the space is, how do you create the atmosphere? We work a lot in healthcare industry, and patients are batched in waiting rooms. And how
Mhm.
do you quote unquote theme that experience to be less of a waiting room feel and more of something that might be interesting and informative, maybe to the patient, or comforting even, and start thinking about that experience while they're being either batched and queued or queued.
Yeah. How do you apply that experience before the experience? So knowing the key experience of healthcare is the interaction with the care team and being able to ask them questions, being able to talk about your condition and the symptoms you're having, and really benefiting from their expertise on an appropriate treatment plan or even a further workup or diagnostics
Right.
to learn more about some underlying concerns. There's a wait though to be able to access those experts. And I think what you're saying is, how does healthcare create an experience before that experience? And I think there's more than just the queue, the waiting room, because there was a experience shaping initiatives that clearly were happening at Disneyland before we even got in the line to wait, And I think a lot of that was in some of our research we did beforehand. So looking up, watching YouTube videos or social media on what rides we really wanted to get on. So, that shaped our impressions and prepared us for the park going experience. So I would think there's an opportunity there for healthcare, since we are talking about that, the experience before the experience is almost now the experience before the waiting experience, before the visit experience, right? So I think there's some curation that can be done beforehand by healthcare to help shape, educate, and prepare the patient for their upcoming visit. So I appreciate that you had mentioned that. I think aside from all the content and the information that's out there around Disney, and that's kind of like the benchmark, they themselves, Disney isn't the one who creates all their content. There's park goers who help contribute to that. But you're right, there is an experience shaping collection of information and assets that are out there that really help people be more prepared for the park going experience. And I wouldn't think that's true. I guess I haven't done enough research about the healthcare going experience and what the resources, blogs, videos, content might be available from other patients that are out there that may help frame that up.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we're going to keep moving on because there was a lot of things that I thought we can explore, and we can't belabor on any one thing because there's a lot. And we may even have to have a third episode on this, Mark. So I want to talk a little bit about the concepts of mistake proofing at Disneyland. So first, let's just roll back and mistake proofing. We're going to give it an elevator speech. I'm going to ask you, what is mistake proofing, just so that we can start there. And then from there, maybe we can roll into some examples that we saw, and then take some of those examples and think about how those might apply to different industries. So I'm going to give you the floor and let you talk just briefly about what is mistake proofing and why is it important?
Yeah, so two lean concepts here we call Jidoka and Poka-Yoke. So Jidoka is really stopping when an error occurs. And I think it's important for us in any industry, in any business, when errors do happen, to think, should I just shut down right now and stop and fix this? Because sometimes if we don't do that, we end up creating extra work for ourselves later, and we don't see that. But once we do stop the line, if you will, or just stop what we're doing and fix the issue, we need to start putting some thought around mistake proofing or error proofing so that cannot happen again. I think a lot of the mistake proofing or error proofing that we see within things that we buy or experiences that we have are because maybe mistakes have happened in the past, right? And so then these mechanisms are built then into these products or services to prevent mistakes from occurring. And you got different types of mistake proofing or error proofing. We call soft error proofing. So things that are just like warning signs, maybe, or caution, don't do this, don't do that. But I could still force that error to occur. And then more of what we call the hard error proofing, which is the way the system's built or the thing is constructed, it won't allow me to make a mistake. So I think the latter part is what we're talking about at Disney. Is what did we see that either slows the guest experience down so that they don't make a mistake, or prevents them from making a mistake and have error occur within the parks. Which, an error there can be a very big event, right? Because there's a lot of eyes on those processes.
Yeah. So in our kickoff, we already discussed the ride safety check. Everyone knows the pull on the yellow tab instructions and how that is a form of error proofing. And in that, they're intentionally stopping the line before the ride goes to verify there's an all clear before they release that ride to run all the way through. So let's talk about the Cars experience, because you board the cars in Cars Land, and then the car goes forward and out of the boarding area, but then queues at the safety check area. And that safety inspector gives you the instructions to pull on the yellow tab. but they're looking at a computerized piece of technology that sits right there. And imagine there's color coding or there's visual cues on that board that helps them, even when we're doing the physical tugging on, they're probably verifying certain information on that through signals or lighting that reinforces that we are safe to proceed to the full ride.
Yeah, almost like a double Poka-Yoke, right? So if you think about your car, when you get in and you latch the seatbelt light turns off. So maybe in those cars, it goes from red to green as you click in.
Mm-hmm.
But all these mistake proofing and error proofing efforts I see, I always think, well, something probably failed in the past
Yeah.
to where they said, you know what, we need additional layers.
I love that you describe it as layers. Thinking about safety in layers, I'm embarrassed to say I've never really thought of it that way. There's multiple checks that are designed to reinforce one another, but with each layer, you're going from a softer maybe to a harder application of error proofing.
Yeah. So you probably have the signals of lighting that indicates if things are buckled, you're doing the physical check. There's also a locking mechanism that happens, all to keep you safe and inside the vehicle. Now, I remember going to Disney when I was younger and getting on the tram from the parking lot to the front of the park. And, you just kind of race, everybody's trying to get to that tram to get into the park. And you get in it and there are no doors and no seatbelts at all. I just remember sitting at the end of one of those trams and it just starts and goes and you just felt free. But today there's doors on those trams because probably error occurred.
Yeah. Also, the signage that's posted, the typical one, the out loud announcement of please keep your hand, feet, body, your whole person inside the ride.
Yeah.
And they have that as a placard, even on a ride such as Small World, right, which is a very slow moving water ride. They are matching the safety protocols to the inherent risk of the ride. And when it comes to It's a Small World, compare that to Rise of Resistance, which you're on a self-navigating shuttle that's making sharp turns, taking elevators up, taking elevators down. Much more inherent risk in that type of ride. So but the posted placards, I think that's like the bare minimum. When you get in the ride, it's on a sticker right in front of you. Before you board the ride, it's discussed out loud over the overhead. So lots of examples of the soft
Yeah.
soft safety protocols, or the soft Poka-Yoke.
And that might be the fourth layer, right? Starting out with just those warning signs or videos or safety instructions before you even get into the vehicle.
Yeah. We talked a lot about error proofing around the ride itself and the safety checks, and I don't know if there's anything left on that. So I think we got to pivot and maybe explore, is there other mistake proofing that's happening in the park that might be more subtle that we can help bring to the surface and say, hey, the reason they're doing this, because safety is a bit of a trade-off, right? It does slow flow. It's introducing steps into the process that some people may perceive as being redundant or unnecessary, but they're designed into the process on purpose. Although they may temporarily slow the flow, in the end, they're tremendously beneficial. So I'm curious, are there other error proofing examples? And I think there might be. One is when you're at the parks, you're there all day, right? You get hungry, and going into the restaurants, there is, at least for us, not in this trip, but in previous trips, we have a food allergy in our family. So I believe they have good air proofing around cross contamination and supporting visitors of the park who do have allergies. There's posted visuals, but I also know the protocol is when you're making the reservation, they're asking you about these questions. And when you're seated, they already have awareness of it. It's oftentimes on the reservation, but then they double check and they ask, what is it? And then they'll escalate to the head chef. Oftentimes will come to the table and review the menu with you and discuss what is safe and what isn't safe. So that's more like the seated experience. Ice cream, for example, I know that protocol is they'll go open a new container to avoid cross-contamination. They're using all new clean supplies. They have a dedicated person who hasn't worked with peanuts do and perform the operational steps to prepare the snack or the meal. So that's one example I can think of is the air proofing around food safety for park goers who have allergies. Maybe we could pull out one more example. Do you have an example, maybe now that I've given you that one, that comes to mind that might be another interesting application of air proofing?
I'm trying to think of one that's interesting. I think what Disney does is a great job of not being error proofing forward. That's part of the magic, is that you don't really notice, but the others are probably way more subtle. Trying to think, of course, there's the security check as you go into the park.
Yep. The thumbprinting at Disney World, the
Face recognition.
those I think are examples. That now a lot of people celebrate the cleanliness of the park, and the trash can that doubles as your picnic table while you're there. So I'm curious, is the strategic placements of trash cans more about cleanliness, or do you believe there's an aspect of safety to the way the cans are placed in the park? Because absence of them, or if they're overflowing, now you have clutter in an already crowded walking space, trash on the floor, potential spills, which could be slip and fall type situations. So do you see that the strategic layout of trash cans is also part of maybe the park safety plan?
Yeah, it could be. I think that Walt said something like he didn't want the guests to travel more than 30 feet without finding a trash can. So I think that they're strategically placed based on distance, or that was the original intent. And I don't know if the original intent was that people would eat off the top of them. But I think that even the design of the trash can has evolved over time to make it conducive for people to do that. So you don't see the cans overflowing. You do see that they are often pretty clean. So I think that they are strategically upkeeping their trash cans. I know inside Disney World, the trash cans are connected. Like there's not bags on Main Street that they have to empty those things out. So it goes down into a tube system, the trash does.
Oh my, okay, wow.
Yeah. That doesn't happen everywhere, like at Epcot and stuff like that. So, and at Epcot, I think there's more eating on top of trash cans just because there's more food to enjoy
Yeah.
there. I even feel like, and I don't know if this is true, but if this is a guest thing or if it was a park thing, but there's promotion of eating on top of those trash cans. Like there's
You see,
maybe t-shirts or something like that saying my table at Epcot or whatever it is.
yeah, the rounding on the trash can to make sure it's empty, to also have someone with ownership to quickly respond to broken glass
Mhm.
or spills. It's not, the park is not clean and safe. I think because it is clean, there is a lot of prevention that is occurring, but that isn't by accident. That's by design, from the number of trash cans and where they're placed, but also the staff and the cast members who own that process of maintaining trash in the park and responding to potential safety concerns around broken glass or spills. So we had previously talked about how has Disney taken the concepts of lean, specifically empowerment of the workforce, and giving them good process in the forms of standards that really helps them to execute a good park experience. So I think we can maybe jump over to that, because I'm in my head thinking they're using standard work and a schedule, balanced resources to make sure that throughout the day, as the crowd gets bigger, they're ramping up their resources to ensure they have adequate people on hand to support the increasing volume of trash, or maybe the increase in volume of spills or whatever. So, and now we're talking a little bit about load leveling and demand management. A lot of the park going operations behind the scenes is contingent on the number of people in the park. And if that is not static throughout the day, it builds, and sometimes crescendos. There's a lull, but at the end of the day, there is massive amounts of visitors in the park, and how you staff to support that throughout the day, it's got to be thought out.
Yeah, I think there's really two topics here, right? One is the load leveling of the guests as they move through the park experience. So you have the app or the display of the waiting times that will allow for the crowds to more evenly space out throughout the park where Disney feels like it's appropriate. But the other side of that is, how do you staff to where the crowds are? And I think that piece is really the cross training or the fungibility of whatever standards are in place. I think that we saw, even while we were out there, some of the queue was real long. This was in the Pirates queue. There was a guy that was kind of managing the line upstream. And then I noticed that he moved inside where the queuing was for the ride later when we journeyed up to that point. So that's interesting, right? So you didn't just stay in one location, one spot, doing one thing the whole day. It seems like they have a rotation that they're doing so that they don't get a burnout maybe, but they're able to go to where they're needed in order to have crowd control. And then I was thinking more on that, even with the entertainment. As we watched the parade, you have these dancers that are dancing, but do they come in and just do that one dance and go home? Or are they actually people that might be in costume earlier in the day in a Mickey or Minnie outfit that you just don't recognize? So do they perform different functions within the park and they're able to spread that out?
I had that same question in my head. The entertainers, there's different cast roles that are played throughout the day, and those that are in more of a on-stage performance based role. That would be on the parade route, right? They only do that once, and when it runs through the whole park, maybe that entertainer, yes, they have to go through the process of their decorum and getting their makeup and their costume and all that, but then the route itself is only 20 minutes of work. So clearly that workforce who produce and participate in that parade, they've got to be used elsewhere throughout their shift. So I have had that question myself. The one thing I noticed, the same movement of the resource in our Pirates ride. The other thing, when we see a resource move from one station to another station, I've seen it. I don't know if you've observed it, but they hand off a ticket to each other, and they do kind of like a rounding with each other, and they give them that piece of paper. The person who's taking the shift arrives with the piece of paper. There's a report out, some form of rounding that happens. They hand that piece of paper to the other person, and then that other person moves out of that station and the other person occupies it. So what is that signal, that piece of paper? What do you think is on it that is facilitating the shift handoff?
Yeah, I wish I knew. And maybe if someone's listening that's a cast member can provide us insight on this, because we're doing a lot of conjecture about what we see at Disney as process improvement folks. But it would be really interesting to get a look behind the scenes to understand, like, what are on these handoff pieces of paper in hand? What is it that it's saying and telling? Disney does a really good job with their standard work or their visual management systems for the cast members. Keep that pretty much hidden from the guest experience. We see it because we've developed eyes to look for that type of stuff. And it's not as forward as like when you go to Kroger and you see at the end of the line, there's a big TV monitor with numbers, or a drive-through that has a display with the cars going through it. And you could tell they're measuring something. Disney likes to keep the magic real and not expose what these pieces and artifacts are.
There's a big production behind the scenes.
Yes.
You don't ever see that is their operations management system that
Right.
allows them to execute the day.
Yeah, and like we were talking about earlier, just the logistics of moving people around in the park to optimize wait times, to optimize merchandise sales, whatever it might be. There's a lot of strategy in it.
Absolutely. And even with that, even with a command center, operations, leadership involved in giving the cast members, they're probably the largest percent of their workforce, clear process and clear guidance for the day of what success would look like, there's still things that are going to go wrong. And I think that's what's really important, that each of those cast members are empowered to make things right for the guest without needing excessive approval. So have you maybe had an experience? I don't think we did on this last trip, where a cast member had an opportunity to support us in additional service beyond maybe what was standard. But I know in the past they have flexibility and empowerment to really elevate the park goers experience. So how do they go about that? There, this concept of empowerment, everyone wants it, but how does an organization achieve it?
Well, I guess there's a model that would suggest that these magical moments, I think is what they call them at Disney, that they have the autonomy to do. Does that far outweigh having a negative experience? And I think we got something like that when we were in Disneyland in Paris. There was something wrong with our room or getting into the hotel room that was on Disney property, and they gave us 4 fast passes. They didn't have to do that. We didn't ask for it. They just did. And when we look back, we think about that magical moment or the things that we got, that probably was no sweat off their back to do that. But it really helped us to have a better impression of the experience in whole. So there has to be some kind of modeling that suggests that we need to empower or give the autonomy to this level of cast member to be able to make these types of decisions to create a better guest experience.
But they have a dedicated guest services team, but that's not just, the guest services office out front. There is aspects of service to the park goer that the cast members help contribute to for maybe what they would say minor incidents. If there is a major incident, one example I can think of is during the holiday party. That's a limited time in the park, and a lot of people want to experience the fireworks show and see the parade and stuff like that. And maybe a more significant experience or interruption there would be being stuck on a ride that prevents you from seeing the fireworks or the parades. And that happened to our family, where a ride went down and we were on it for nearly 45 minutes or so. Their first priority was our safety. So they went through their processes to make sure a cast member walked through the ride and was at your side while they were waiting on instructions on how to help you exit the ride safely. But then after you were safely removed from the ride and navigated back to that entry point, the service team in droves were lined up there with tablets to support you in service recovery. And you can have waited in line and interacted with them, or you could have waited till the next day. But they also had, for the kids, I remember they had Jack Sparrow. I don't know why it took me that long to think of the main character. Pirates, I just lost nerd points there. But Jack Sparrow was also dispatched to receive you coming out, and he, in his persona, was apologizing for the interruption as well. So that was a planned service recovery, but there's a lot of unplanned service recovery that has to happen, and that can only occur through empowering all cast members with the autonomy within certain parameters to provide service.
Yeah, agreed.
How would we take that? Empowerment starts with giving them a process and a standards and a definition of what success looks like for the day. And then whenever they detect things are drifting from that definition of success, they have the ability and influence to do something about it. So if we say that is what we would like to see become present in other industries and other organizations, how do you think some organizations can benefit from this example of Disneyland and maybe start to develop it for their workforce that they haven't already?
Yeah, I think they got to realize it as a benefit first
Mhm.
and then create some structure around it. So we talked about the magical moment at Disney, and Chick-fil-A also has the extra mile
Mhm.
service.
Mhm.
So they have programs built around empowering their staff to be able to do something that's extra. And I think it's important. I remember I went to a location when I was a manager. I went to a Florida location that where the store just had what's called turkey and stars ratings, and they were all turkeys. This was a poor performing store. And when I got there, I quickly realized it was the service manager who was really not empowering the service writers to do what was correct.
Mhm.
Right. So, and it felt like to me that the service writers had good judgment. So I just gave them the autonomy to do what they thought was right, and whether that was a mistake or not.
Mhm.
So if they just gave away a set of four tires because that's what they felt like they should do, I would have them walk me through the thought process. Like, tell me why you did that without maybe harsh judgment on them.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
if it was the right decision, we would say, that's great. And if it was maybe not, we'd say, okay, this is what the cost is. This is what, could happen now. And I think by just empowering the team, we went from turkeys to stars pretty quickly and became one of the better service departments in the region. So I think that that's important, right? To empower the staff, to provide them autonomy, to do what's right for the customer, in this case, customer's experience. And you don't often see the return on that. So
Mhm.
if you don't do something, you may have lost a customer for life.
Yeah.
And if you do something, you may gain a customer for life, right? So it's not just the single transaction that's right in front of you, but you have to have a long-term play for how do we retain. And just like with the service writers, we would look at their history of service with our department and say, okay, this customer has, come here for all their maintenance stuff and they're having this issue and it may cost us this much, but
Mhm.
over the life cycle of this vehicle, we can expect to have a happy customer for this long of a time. So I think it's important for organizations to look at this and see that it's a best practice within these organizations that are doing really well, like a Disney and a Chick-fil-A. It's something to consider no matter the size or scale of business that they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other things I heard in that was empowerment is also about leadership and their trust in the operator, the person who is interacting with the customer to make the right decision. So there's definitely that switch in mindset of how leaders support and trust and provide coaching to the operators. And the other part is service recovery is not the short game. It sounds like it's the long game, and it's about the longevity of the relationship and not just the transaction right in front of you, but what happens beyond that. What's the reciprocal benefit of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So I know we're running on time here, and we haven't even talked about the app, which is constantly evolving, being updated, and new features added all the time. But when we talk about continuous improvement, people will always say it's people, process, and technology. And I believe that they have a really strong system, a system that's ever evolving and continuously being updated to kind of facilitate good experiences and better processes through a technological portal. So in the app, we can make our park reservations, we can put our tickets in there, we can look at wait times for rides. If you purchase the Genie or the Lightning Lane, it's how you gain ride access. It's food ordering in there. It's now shopping. So in the stores, you can do virtual checkout from your phone. So this use of technology enables a lot of processes to be facilitated, even photos in the park, right? Like those getting off the cars, right? there's the screens up on the wall, and there was a kiosk right to the right with a register, right? And it indicated that at one point in time, the only way to have got one of those pictures that were on those TVs was to go to that kiosk and that cast member right there and purchase the hard copy of the photo, right? Like that's almost nostalgia right there. But you can see just the process of providing photos of the person's park going experience has been transformed by technology. Maybe when you and I were younger, we would go to the park, we'd see our photo, we'd write our number down, and if we wanted to take that token back with us, we would talk to the staff, the cast members at the photo booth, and they would print us a hard copy, and we would have our photo in our memory. Now it's interconnected to your phone so that you can get your photos right there on your phone and download them and then do whatever you want with them. So that whole process has been transformed by technology. And I think there's more interesting things yet to come than that system that they've created. But I'm curious, what are your perceptions on the Disney app? And maybe what are some things that I've already talked about? Getting your photo was a process that's been completely redesigned and enabled by technology. So maybe what are some of those things that that app has enabled the park goers to do for themselves? What are some examples that we could take and say, what if that applied here? So let's just kind of unpack the app a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think the app has done a lot. Like I said, the low leveling the guests to different areas of the park, posting wait times, whether they're real wait times or not, and how they orchestrate the fast pass piece of it or lightning lane. They have the ability now to just stay away from a 4.5 hour wait for Spaceship Earth from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. They have the ability now to move people around so that they can enjoy other park experiences and still come back and have less wait time, which means they're able to buy more merchandise or eat more food.
Mm-hmm.
And they've sped up that process so that you can mobile order your food so you're not waiting a half hour in line for food. And you talked about the photos. I have one iteration past you because I'm a bit older. So the ability to look at your photo and then go to a kiosk there and get it printed out. When I was a kid, that wasn't even a thing. So it was you would get your pictures done during the day. And at Epcot, it was up under the ball. And at MGM Studios, it was the dark room camera area.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day is when those pictures would be available to everyone and only there. So you couldn't buy the pictures post park going experience. You couldn't have them directly downloaded from your app. There were only hard copies. And so around 7 or 8 o'clock at night, it seemed like the whole park was trying to get into this one small store to buy their pictures. And then the cast members have to sift through this numbering system to find your pictures among all the pictures that they were developing during the day. So yeah, so it's come a long way, and technology has given them the ability to have us have a better park going experience, even though sometimes we may feel like, well, this is too much technology or it's too complicated and it might be a barrier for some of us, but it really is facilitating the movement of people, the experience for people in the park so that they're able to enjoy and get the most out of it during the day.
Now, do you have maybe some analogous or comparisons for how other industries might benefit from introducing technology as a complement to their people, their operations, and in their processes?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a shift, right, to mobile ordering, whether that's Starbucks or Chick-fil-A or what have you. We have a whole new line now at Chick-fil-A that's just
Mhm.
based off of the mobile order. I think it's risky in that there's some tweaking that has to be involved when you introduce these things, but I think you're able to serve more in a quicker amount of time by leveraging technology. So you want to make sure that your processes are always secure first before introducing technology. If you start out technology first without having secure processes, you could really mess some stuff up.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's good guidance for sure.
yeah, it should be an add to right? Not just to start with. So,
Great.
yeah.
Man, I just have a couple of lightning round questions here. This one is, what part of the park going experience do you think represents continuous improvement the best? And I think, having heard a bit about the process to obtain your photos and your memories of the park through a picture, has evolved tremendously over time from what you explained as not even knowing how the photos looked at the point of exiting the ride or in standing in front of the castle or meeting a character. You wouldn't even know what the quality of those photos were until the end of the day, and the only way you could see them was in this wasted time of waiting in line to get into the print center, all the way to now you wear a RF device on your wrist. It detects that you're on this ride and it takes a picture and links it to your phone because of this RF device. So I think that is clearly an example of a process that's been redesigned and re-engineered multiple times through continuous improvement. So maybe let's pick up one more. What is one park going experience or attraction that best represents continuous improvement other than getting your photos?
I'd have to think about that. Do you have one?
And maybe we can come back to it.
I'll say this about the photos too. I know you wanted me to hop off of that, but as you were talking about it, as a kid, I would remember that when we would get up to the front of the line and they would show us the pictures, like they'd have 4 or 5 pictures of us and they would try to put them in different frames to try to sell you the frames as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times, like if you didn't like the way you looked in the picture or, you just don't buy it. And
Didn't they? It was like printed. So if
they
you
were printed. So, and I always thought like, well, what are they going to do? Just throw it away? Like I'll take it for free. Yeah, I'll take it for free. I don't want to spend $30 for it, but you're just going to throw it away. And that's my picture. So there's a ton of waste in the production. So they had overproduction and excess inventory. And then at the end of the day, there's just a lot of waste there.
Yeah. Well, I would think maybe an example of continuous improvement is the advances in park design from the legacy park, the OG Disneyland, to Walt Disney World, the tunnel system, and how the staff can move more seamlessly across that. And imagine in creating Walt Disney World, Magic Kingdom, and then the other parks in that area, there was some learning that had happened that then they used and applied to when they started to open the international parks. So I think even the creation of the parks and how each of them are advanced copies of the previous one is an example of continuous improvement. From a Kaizen event perspective, if we were to pick a better spokesperson for Kaizen events, would it be Buzz Lightyear for innovation, or would it be Cinderella's fairy godmother for transformation?
I would say the godmother for transformation.
Awesome. All right. If Walt Disney were classified as a lean sensei, what do you think would be attributed to him?
The idea of endless possibility and using your imagination and creativity.
I definitely agree. There's the imagination and innovation for sure. He would be a guru of that. I also think the heightened sense of customer experience and designing what their needs in mind before design thinking was even coined, that he was clearly thinking in that fashion and required that same thinking of his leadership team, which created this culture that still is present today around exceptional experiences and innovative ideas.
Yeah, values determined by the customer, and we built the business around that. And if you understand what the customer needs and wants, if you cater to that, which is exactly what they did, you should be successful.
Brilliant. Man, this was a fun episode, Mark. I had a lot of fun. We explored a lot. I'm seeing in my notes there's some things we just ran out of time on. So I think we're going to have maybe one more of these.
Yeah, I mean, the whole time I'm just going back to the queuing piece in my mind and thinking, we didn't even talk about pin trading, which is something that occupies the time and interactions of those in the queue with each other.
Yes.
That's pretty genius.
Yep, there's quite a few things yet to come, so we may have to have further conversation. I'd be open to it as a big fan of Disney, so this was a lot of fun and I can't wait for the next one.
All right, thank you. And that's a wrap on part 2 of our Disney conversation. Hopefully this gives you a few new ways to spot lean in the wild, from queue design to mistake proofing to how technology shapes flow and experience. If this episode sparked some new ideas for your own organization, we'd love to hear about it. And if you're enjoying these conversations, make sure to subscribe, share the episode, and keep the discussion going. Until next time, keep improving, keep nerding out, and remember to always leave your processes better than you found them.